Well, hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our assessment and evaluation of student learning. We're going to be looking specifically at evaluation of student learning. So those are sort of the summative ideas of how do we actually see if the students at the end of the unit or at the end of a project, how do we actually see if they learned what we had hoped that they would learn. So that's our focus for today. So just to start us off, I wanted to bring to your attention some of the views on evaluation from the Alberta Teachers Association. So this will be your professional association that you will be part of when you are a teacher. So these are the views that the ATA holds. So on the purpose, this is from a 2006 statement on evaluation. I couldn't find anything more recent, but there might be things coming out soon with potential new curriculum and things like that. But this is a 2006 document. So on the purpose of student evaluation, the primary purpose of student assessment and evaluation, so that's that formative and summative, is to support student learning. Student assessment and evaluation practices must be fair and appropriate to the learning needs of the students. So there's that whole differentiation concept. On fairness to students, students must have the opportunity to learn the curriculum on which they will be tested. So we can't just assume that they know things. We have to actually teach them the concepts and then let them have some hands-on experience with it. And students' evaluation and assessment practices must suit the purposes for which the test is intended. So we're going to talk about making sure that how you actually taught the material and how you actually test the material is actually connected, that there's not a disjunct between the two of them. Okay, and on the role of teachers, teachers are responsible for the design, implementation, and interpretation of student evaluation, and provincial achievement test results should not be used for student evaluation. So your ATA is and always has been, and we'll look at this more when we look at standardized tests, against standardized tests being actually used for student evaluation. They see that there's a purpose for it, maybe as a snapshot of student learning in Alberta, but not as a way to evaluate students nor to judge schools' effectiveness. And on provincial achievement testing, teachers are opposed to standardized testing, including achievement testing, where the test is not appropriate to the educational needs of the student and when the results are misused. Okay, so I think it's interesting for you to know as future teachers kind of how your professional body views assessment and evaluation, and then ultimately how they view standardized achievement tests, which again we will look at more specifically closer to the end of term. But just keep this in mind as we go through looking at evaluation today. So here is a quote to get us going. It is worth noting right from the start that assessment is a human process conducted by and with human beings and subject inevitably to the frailties of human judgment. However crisp and objective we might try to make it, and however neatly quantifiable may be our results, assessment is closer to an art than a science. It is, after all, an exercise in human communication. I really think that's a cool quote because oftentimes we see certain testing or evaluation procedures or formats as more rigorous, that they'll give truer results, that you'll actually be able to get a really accurate view of student learning. And what we're finding is that they're just as susceptible to subjectivity as any other sort of formative assessment that the teacher might use. So even just talking to the child, observing the child, doing low stakes quizzes, doing e-portfolios, doing projects will actually will give as objective of a view of the student learning as sort of what we see as formal tests, multiple choice tests, standardized tests, things like that. So even there is always going to be a subjective part of any test, how it's written, the bias that are in the questions. Again, we're going to look at this around standardized tests, but I kind of want you to be thinking that there is no perfectly objective test. Every test, there are some subjective parts to it. Okay, so let's continue on thinking about that. Hey, sorry about that little glitch there. I had a little technical difficulty. My second screen died on me. So now we're ready to go. So now let's look at some of the specifics of what it takes to create sort of one of the most common forms of evaluation, test writing. So now this is not you as a student writing the test. This is you as a teacher creating the test. So I'm going to go through some of the things that you need to think about when you write a test in order to actually make it as close to a replica of the student's learning as possible. So we need to be thinking about when we're writing tests that tests are reliable, that they are valid, and that they are fair. So let's unpack those a little bit. So reliability is the extent to which an assessment produces consistent results, or they can be reproducible. There we go. Had the syllables on the wrong spot. Reproducible. They should be stable. They should be dependent, and they should be relatively free from errors. So if there's a question that every student is getting wrong, you probably want to evaluate that particular question. So an example of reliable would be, say, a social studies teacher in high school has 3 classes of social 10, and she gives the same test to all 3 classes and basically gets the same average in all 3 classes. She can probably say that her exam is reliable because it gives consistent results. It also has to be valid. So validity refers to the extent to which an assessment measures what it actually is intended to measure. So it actually, like it says there, assesses what it is supposed to assess, or evaluate what it is actually supposed to evaluate. So say if I wanted you to, on an exam, analyze Vygotsky's theory in a grade 2 classroom, I would have to give that question in a short answer type question. I couldn't really give it to you in a multiple choice question because it's just not the right format for you to really show your analysis learning. So that's what it means by validity. So it really has to assess what it's supposed to be assessing. Okay, so if your test, I'm just going to read this. If your test does a balanced job of sampling a full range of content that has been taught, and students get 80% average on the test, you can conclude that students probably have learned 80% of what you taught. However, this is the catch for tests. If you give samples, if you only test on part of the materials that you taught and students get 80% correct, the test results give no clear indication of how much of the overall content the student has learned. So again, if you're just sort of picking and choosing and kids get 80%, you're actually not really sure if they've learned everything, but you have to decide what is important for them to learn. Okay, so that's reliability and validity. This little quote in the middle, tests can be reliable, but not valid, again, is important. So the tricky part is a test cannot be valid until it is reliable. So an assessment can provide you with consistent results. So you can consistently, like that social studies teacher, get an average of 75 throughout all 3 of her classes, making so that it's reliable, but unless it is actually measuring what it is supposed to measure, it's not valid. Okay, so I'll go back to that social studies example. So if the social study is consistent, again, across all 3 classes, but say she's trying to assess higher level blooms, so that creation analysis section, but all she asks are recall questions or knowledge-based questions, then it's not valid because the test doesn't actually evaluate what she wanted to evaluate. Okay, so tests can be reliable and give consistent results, but they're not valid in that they don't actually show student learning. Okay, and fair. This is when all students have equal opportunity to learn and demonstrate their knowledge and skill. Okay, so this is when you as the teacher provide that differentiation that we've been talking about, that you choose the evaluation to actually really reflect what you did in the class, and that you don't bring bias, stereotype, threat, discrimination against any kind of cultural background or any kind of learning disability. So again, the student has to have had a really fair shot at learning the material in order for that evaluation to be fair. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a background into the sort of the foundations of writing tests. Okay, when you go to start writing tests as a teacher, you want to think about creating a table of specifications. So this is this is based on Bloom's taxonomy, which I have here, and this is basically just a table that you will create, and I'll show you an example. It's just a table that you create in order to analyze your own test. So it ensures that a test contains a fair and representative set of questions that reflect the curricular emphasis of instruction. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab my pencil here. Sometimes I have Bloom's taxonomy over here, which is sort of the most common taxonomy, the common language that you will hear around this, but you also may see these words. So I just kind of color coded them too. So knowledge is basically remember, comprehension and application is basically apply and understand, and the analysis and evaluation is evaluate and analyze, and synthesis is create. So if you see these terms here, you'll kind of know how they equate to Bloom's, but generally you'll see lots of Bloom's taxonomy verbs in there. Basically, this table of specifications is just like a spec sheet. It's a spec sheet that you want to have to look at your test and say, okay, I actually have a full range of Bloom's verbs in here, or Bloom's ideas, and that is actually how I taught the course as well. So it's kind of like, if you go to buy a new car and you get the spec sheet on it, and like you want to know if it has leather seats and heat seaters, and then you also want to know horsepower, and you want to know rods and pistons and all those sorts of things, right? It gives you a little bit of an overview of your exam in there. So if you write an exam, so say you teach volcanoes in grade 3, and you write an exam, and it has all sorts of create and evaluate type questions on it, but then you actually look back at what you taught, and you only did things like, what is a volcano physically? How are volcanoes formed? Why do volcanoes erupt? Which are really kind of remember and understand concepts. On your test, you then can't suddenly ask the students, what would it be like to have your village destroyed by a volcano? You kind of can't go there if you haven't actually taught it. So this table of specifications gives you that chance to actually analyze, did I teach it this way? And is it how I'm evaluating, is it actually a fair evaluation? Okay, so what to include in a table of specifications? Basically, you're going to include your topics that you're going to cover on the test. You're going to jot down the number of questions used to assess each topic, and actually write down like the number. So if you have 50 questions, you write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 50. And then the level of thinking required for each category of the questions, again, related to Bloom's taxonomy. So let's have a look and see what this actually looks like. So here are some examples. Sorry, my second screen is just not happening today. Not playing by the rules. Okay, sorry, here we go. So this is, I'm just gonna grab my pencil again here. So here are your topics. So if I was giving say a 50 question multiple choice test, and I was doing it around test creation, these would be my topics. So measurement scales, reliability, validity, writing short answer questions, and creating true false tests. So these are my topics. So then what I would do is I would go through and I would say, okay, question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are basically knowledge questions on measurement scales. 9 through 12 are knowledge questions on reliability. Okay, and then I go up here. So then 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11 are comprehension questions on measurement scales, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So you can see that evaluation is kind of light compared to knowledge. So then I would assume that how I had taught these topics, I would have given you a lot of knowledge, but I wouldn't have asked you to have done a lot of evaluation with this knowledge. So that's where this table specifications actually comes in quite handy, because if you look back on your test and it is all knowledge, you probably next time you teach this course want to be thinking about getting your students up into the analysis, synthesis, evaluation type areas. Okay. And finally, here's just a blank document. So again, you can do it by objectives. Like I want my students to learn the foundational ideology of how to write a test. That could be my objective. And then I would go through the same thing here and I would write in, I want them to do a test that is 50 questions, but there's only 10 multiple choice, there's 3 true false, those kind of things. And then I would put that in here. Again, it's just kind of a cool thing to do to really see if your evaluation is actually connected to your learning, because that is one of the foundations of evaluation. That's one of the foundations that the ATA puts forth, that they're actually connected and there's not a big disjunct in there. Okay, let's have a little bit of a go with some of these are some potential questions that I could have asked you on your midterm if I was still using multiple choice tests. So I want you to just think about what kind of blooms, where on the Bloom's taxonomy would these particular questions lie? So Jaden is performing well above grade level in science and has developed the ability to develop and test hypotheses according to Piaget's model. Jaden is in what stage of cognitive development? Formal operations. Okay, is that remembering, understanding, analysis, creating? I would say it's remembering or understanding. So basically, if you kind of have a general idea, you're remembering the content. Number 2, according to Vygotsky, the range of tasks that children cannot perform independently but can perform with the help of others is known as zone of proximal development. What do you think? Where on the Bloom's taxonomy? Again, I would say remember or understand. As long as you have a concept of it, you will probably get this question right. Okay, let's look at number 3. Mr. Smith, the chemistry teacher, focused all his attention on teaching the concepts outlined in the curriculum. In terms of Schwab's 4 commonplaces, he is likely paying little attention to... What do you think this one is? Okay, starting to move up into understand and analyze, because the content isn't necessarily there. You have to kind of go, focuses all his attention on teaching concepts. I didn't give you the 4 commonplaces here. And so again, it's starting, but it's still kind of that understand, just sneaking up into analysis. Okay, number 4, describe and give examples of the student-centered instructional approach. Where do you think that is? I would say analyze into apply, because I want you to describe it, which you could say describing is just remembering or understanding. So you could have said that because you're just describing basically what you have learned about it. But then give examples of the student-centered instructional approach. So this could be, if I had actually written give examples from your own practicum, that would definitely be an applied question, because you have to then take that knowledge and actually pick out how it is connected to your practicum. And number 5, why is it important for you as a future teacher to have an understanding of Erikson's psychosocial theory? What do you think? Again, I would say apply, starting in to evaluate. Why is this important in there? Okay, so again, it's just kind of interesting to actually look at questions and go, okay, what is the foundation of these particular questions? So when you are selecting questions for exams, you want to choose the question format that provides the most direct measure of the learning objective. So remember the learning objectives that I had for you, and the sort of what I want you to be able to take away from this course. That is connected to how I write the exams. So, for example, you want to look back at how you actually taught, and an indication of the how much your test should focus on a particular topic usually equates to how much time you spent on it. So if you generally spend more time on a topic, you hopefully have gone up the Bloom's taxonomy. And then hopefully that will then be emulated in your summative assessment or your evaluation. So, short answer: describe the manifestation of a 9-year-old student who has not resolved the conflict in infancy, trust versus mistrust stage. So I purposely put this as a short answer because we did spend a bit of time on this whole idea of having to resolve that conflict, but we didn't spend hours and hours on it. So I put it as a short answer question. However, I put as a long answer the concept of Piaget and Vygotsky, because we spent a fair bit of time on those theories. We dove deep into their theories. We applied it into the classroom, those kind of things. So that's why that particular one was a long answer question, because we had spent a bit more time on that one and gone a little bit deeper. Okay, let's jump into now specific types of exam questions that you will be creating as a teacher. So there are basically 2 main categories: selected response items, which are basically recognition or recall, and constructed response items, which are more problem solving. So we're going to look at selected response items first, and then we'll go into constructed. So here we go. These are kind of your basic, you've seen all of these as students: true, false, matching, multiple choice. So let's have a look at these particular ones. Oh, I should actually go back and tell you why those are selected. You probably have figured that out because you select the right answer, right? In true, false, the right answer is there. Matching, the right answer is there. Multiple choice, the right answer is there. So you simply not simply, that's an incorrect thing to say. You have to figure out which is the correct answer. That's why it's called selected response. Okay, so true, false, basically it's a test of knowledge for fundamental facts. So there's not a lot of higher level Blooms in true, false questions. It's basically, you want to know, do they understand the fundamental facts? It can be used for a quick review, and it's often a component of both formative and summative assessment. Okay. So things to think about when you are including true, false on exams. It places less demand on reading ability than do multiple choice questions, right? They're usually not as long. So if the kids struggle with actual reading ability, they don't get hampered by just so much text. You can put a large number on a test, and they can be answered fairly quickly in a short period of time. Teachers, they're easy to score, right? It's just boom, 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 and they're seen as less objective because it's either right or wrong, it's either true or false. But again, going back to that beginning quote, how you write the question and all of the bias that we will bring into writing the test, it's never as objective as we think it is. Okay? And we try not to, when you write true and false questions, try not to just take questions rote, like from notes or from the textbook or from whatever, however you gave them the content, because then it's just straight up memorization. Those kids who have that photographic memory will get it right, even though they might have no concept about what it is. They just remember it. And there's guessing is a huge part of true false, right? We've all got it's like 50-50 chance. Like you never leave true false. You never leave it blank unless it's right minus wrong, which is nasty. That's a nasty thing. So again, you have to evaluate why you're using true false and if it's the best method to use to actually see if students learn the material that you're learning. Okay, let's look at matching questions now. So matching, basically, they require recognition and recall of information. Again, those lower level blooms, and they assess understanding of linkages and associations between concepts. So if you have A, what is A linked to B, C, D, or over here? So again, we've all done matching. It's either like actual physical, draw the line, which is kind of fun for kids, but then it gets kind of convoluted to mark, or number one, and then you match it to F, or number two, you match it to I, those kind of things. I'm sure all of you have done matching questions. It's fairly effective with younger children. Again, is not a ton of writing. So those kids who get bogged down in actual writing, actually matching works well to show if they understand the concepts. It doesn't actually physically take up a lot of room on exams, which is important if you're doing standardized tests and you are printing out thousands upon thousands of tests. It's kind of one of those things that, you think, this shouldn't be a factor in writing tests, but it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's easy to mark as the teacher. Again, boom, boom, boom. And again, it seems objective, but yeah, we've gone over that. And cons, again, it's usually about memorization and not a lot of complex higher level blooms is happening in matching. Okay. Let's go on here to... Oops. Multiple choice. This is our favorite, is it not? Multiple choice is our favorite. We love multiple choice. Sorry, I don't know what. Whoa. My second screen is jumping all over the place, but I'm going to try to get it to move down here. There we go. Okay. So, again, test factual knowledge, but also used to measure complex reasoning skills and application of understanding. Of the selected construct questions, multiple choice questions actually really do have the ability to move up blooms. So you can actually write a question that gets those kids into that analysis, synthesis type level. However, they must be carefully designed. A good multiple choice test or question is really hard to write. It's easy to mark, but it's hard to write. And it places multiple choice tests place a high demand on reading abilities because they have to be able to read the different parts of the question. Okay, so let's look at kind of good practice on writing multiple choice tests. So basically, when we talk about the stem of the question, that's the question part of it, right? And then the choices are the choices that the students actually choose from, A, B, C, or D. So when you are writing multiple choice in the STEM, try to avoid long, complex sentences. We've all written those exams where it's like, I don't actually know what they're asking because the sentence, it was a paragraph and I got lost in the middle. So try to keep it fairly succinct. Try not to give trivial statements in it to throw kids off. We're trying to assess their learning. We're trying to evaluate their learning. We're not trying to trick them and throw them off. Negatives and double negatives, isn't that crazy? If the student did not do this when they didn't have and you're like, whoa, I don't actually know what that means. So try not to do negatives and double negatives. Try not to have ambiguous or indefinite terms, absolute statements, and broad generalizations because, again, they're confused by that. And don't give them clues to the answer. We all know, when there's an A at the end of the sentence, then obviously the teacher has, and then there's only one response that starts with a vowel, we usually go with that one. So and those kind of things. And you want to avoid in the choices statements similar to the correct answer. So if you've used a term over and over again, or try not to pull it straight from resources, because then again, all they're doing is recalling and memorizing. Completely implausible responses. Sometimes you get tired and you just write something crazy for one of the choices. Then it's down to just a 3, kind of thing. And then it's a 33% chance that they're just going to get it just because they guessed correctly. And all of our favorites, all of the above and none of the above. Oh, those are nasty. Try not to use those very often, because again, it's just a hard thing for students to wade through in the exam. Overlapping responses, if A is true, then it should be B, and if B is false, then again, those are kind of brutal. Good practice in the STEM, or actually in the question, use your own words, not statements straight out of the textbook. Address single, clearly formulated problems, so just go after one thing. Don't have lots of different concepts. In the choices, make them plausible and homogeneous distractors, so keep the same kind of language in all of them. Don't let one get really kind of weird in the language, but keep all of them the same language. True statements that do not answer the questions. Okay, so again, it's linked to the question but doesn't actually answer it. Give them short options, all the same length if possible. Correct options evenly distributed over A, B, C. Again, we often will put the correct answer in C, because it's like when we're writing it, we're like, oh yeah, okay, so this could be a possibility. This could be a possibility. Oh yeah, I got to get the right answer in there. There's C, and then D is kind of the crazy outlier. Again, try to mix it up and have at least 3 alternatives so that it doesn't just become a guessing thing. So, when you guys wrote all those multiple choice tests all through school, hopefully this is what the teacher was doing, was looking at the actual questions, linking it back to how they actually taught the course, thinking about the actual exam, because probably most of you, I would say, are probably good at writing multiple choice exams because you're here. You've survived the multiple choice barrage, right? And so you learn how to write the test, not necessarily you didn't necessarily learn the material. And that's where there are some issues with multiple choice. Okay, let's go on to now constructed response items. These are more problem-solving questions. So this is where, again, just like selected, they get to select. This is where now they have to actually construct. They actually have to construct the responses. So you can probably figure out what's going to come. So basically there are short answer, restricted essay, and essay type questions. So let's jump into short answer. Sorry, I'm just going to go. Hang on, my screen is locked again. I will just be, actually, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start another video with this to get my screen going. So we'll see you in a bit.